It's the debate of all time. Is climate change real? I'm going to make it quick to the point, and I plan to show you today the evidence of climate change, solutions, and efforts towards those solutions are slowed. Now, I want to get it out of the way before I start into anything else. Global warming and climate change are two different things. Global warming can be referred as a type of climate change. By definition, global warming means that it's the observed century-scale rise of the Earth's temperature. Climate change, also by definition, is the change in global or regional climate patterns due to increased amounts of carbon dioxide emissions caused by humans and of fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and natural gases. But how can a small thing such as little changes in climate patterns cause such a big effect around the world? It's pretty simple. NASA and BBC News have given us evidence as to why climate change happens. NASA has an entire webpage dedicated to the facts and evidence that there of science of climate change. And to delve into it, we can begin with the global temperature rise. The average temperature has risen 1.1 degrees Celsius, that's 2 degrees Fahrenheit, in the last century. This is what causes everything else. Next is warming oceans. Oceans have absorbed most of this heat. The top 700 meters, or about 2,300 feet, I've done it. The ocean showing about 0.302 degrees Fahrenheit and change since 1969. This causes fish populations to decline in millions. It is also causing the Great Barrier Reef, a world wonder, to have coral bleaching and therefore die since 2014. This also causes other coral reefs around the world to die as well. Shrinking ice sheets. Greenland and Antarctica have declined in mass so much. Greenland has lost about 150 to 250 cubic kilometers, about 66 trillion gallons of ice in between the years of 2002 and 2006. Antarctica lost about 152 cubic miles of ice, about 39 trillion gallons of ice in between 2002 and 2005. Glacial retreat. Glaciers have been retreating all over the world. This causes mudslides, rock slides, and habitat loss. This ranges from the Alps, Rockies, Himalayas, Alaska, and Africa. Decreased snow cover. Satellite observations have shown that the Northern Hemisphere has been losing a lot of spring snow cover, and that snow is melting earlier. Last year, we barely got any snow over the winter season, barely under a foot of snow, and that's not causing enough fast rate for decaying of leaves and dead animals and stuff like that, and the soil can't read this thing. Sea level rise. Global sea level rose 8 inches in the last century. In the last 2 decades, it has been double of that, causing coastlines to rise up. Coastal cities have reported that the sea is just rising. It's causing less beaches and floodings and this and that. And declining Arctic sea ice. NASA has tried several times to show the change from like the 1960s to today on how much the Arctic has changed. It has its extent and thickness has melted over time. Extreme events. This is probably the most important and the most damaging of climate change. In between mid-August to about mid-September, the world had experienced hurricanes, flash floods in Lower Asia, and wildfires all over the world and earthquakes in all regions. The last time any part of the world has experienced more than 3 hurricanes was in the Pacific. Hawaii experienced 3 hurricanes at once. In August, we have reported that 4 to 5 hurricanes formed in the Atlantic and ran up the coast of Lower Mexico and into the Gulf of Mexico and up the American southern American coast. 2 of those hurricanes were reported a Category 4 and a Category 5. The Category 5 hit America coastlines at a Category 4 and ravaged the Caribbean at a Category 5. The others remained a Category 3 or gone down to a tropical depression, which is just very small, very minuscule. And lastly is ocean acidification. This means that about 30% of the ocean has gained about 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide each and every year, causing the acidity of the water to rise up. This also has an effect on fish populations, marine life, to where they have to migrate earlier. They can't lay their eggs where they usually do. They can't do this and that. Now the solutions. New York Times has reported several ways to where we can be able to stop climate change. They have reported that several countries across the world have been starting fuels. I lied. I talked about BBC News earlier saying that they talk about how there's so much things uncertain. There's freshwater shortages. There's food production conditions, like less food is going to be produced. There's diseases that are found in food today, like so much. And there's going to be an increase in number of deaths from the fires, the earthquakes, and the hurricanes. Extreme events. There's going to be more than what there once was in August and September. And about 30 to 50% of plant and animal species plan to be extinct. Critically endangered frogs in South America died by the thousands due to pollution and habitat loss. Anyway, yeah, New York Times reported several ways, like the fuel standard emissions for cars, stricter building codes, and stricter emission levels for power plants. However, scientists have said that we need to have a better energy transition and stricter regulations by 2025 if we are having any chance to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Plus, there's the Paris Agreement. For those who don't know what the Paris Agreement is, it is a organization made up by the UN where all countries come together every year to evaluate what they have pledged to do against climate change. They try to get other countries to sign it and help pledge for it. And this year, all 197 countries planned to sign it, did sign it, except for 3. The United States pulled out earlier this year. Syria is in ruins and is in the middle of a civil war to even bother. And Nicaragua believed and actually protested against the Paris Agreement, saying that its commitments and regulations are not enough. As the United States found out about Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement, the hundreds upon hundreds of protests sprouted across the country. And over the next few days, cities also began to light up their monuments in colors of green. The something starts with K bridge over in New York lighted itself up in green, and the One World Trade Center, also in New York, light up in green. Hawaii was also the first state of the United States to sign the Paris Agreement, saying that they do not support Trump's decision as they are seeing the change right before their eyes. California, Washington, and New York plan to create a breakaway group to lead the cause on decarbonization with or without the president's support. There's also the easiest ways of solutions. Tesla let out their solar power shingles, where they can be able to collect 2 days worth of solar power without recharging, and that is held in the Tesla Powerwall. Their wind energy is also becoming very popular too. Not to brag, Iowa is in the top 5 of wind consumption. There's also bioenergy, recycling, hydrogen fuel cells, which I use personally in Principles of Engineering to power a boat, and electric cars. However, something is wrong. Fun fact. The United States spends $5 billion a year on energy research. In the 2016 federal budget proposal, they plan to spend $52.1 billion on energy and environment. This is a part of a $4.1 trillion budget, and that's just 1% of it. They also plan to spend $32.1 billion on science, which is also 1%. And yet they spend $600 billion on military. A tank company in Ohio has asked the United States government to stop sending tanks over to their company because it's expensive to make, hard to handle, and just overall tough. Why spend money on something that we don't need except pushing it forward to something else that we do need to fight? Earlier this year, President Trump froze the Environmental Protection Agencies, also known as the EPA's, accounts and funds for reasons that are still unknown. So they are unable to conduct their investigations against anything else. This doesn't just come from climate change. They can't protect our national parks. They can't protect farming. They can't do much against hunting regulations. They can't do anything. President Trump also elected the science bashing, and climate change denying Chief Scott Pruitt, where he has gone towards the chief of staff of the EPA and made sure that every single scientist keeps their mouth shut about anything else, or they stick to the industry's talking points, meaning that studies that have been found on how to help environments, how to make sure to keep deforestation down and populations up, they cannot speak a word about it unless it goes through Scott Pruitt. This means that the EPA is unable to do anything. And by unable, I mean that the science division in the government is empty. The science division is where the president can get advice on how to help everything stem on a economical and political level. It has been the science division has been empty since this June. President Trump planned to fire 11 people, but then the number rose up to 38 until it came down to the last 3 people, which left by June. And it hasn't been filled since. There's also this.
Incredibly, this latest damning scientific report may still face an uphill climb with some of us.
There's that Gallup poll that came out last month, which found 1 in 4 Americans is skeptical of all the effects of climate change and thinks this issue's been exaggerated.
Who gives a shit? That doesn't matter. You don't need people's opinions on a fact. You might as well have a poll asking which number is bigger, 15 or 5. Or do owls exist? Or are there hats? The debate on climate change should not be whether or not it exists. It's what we should do about it. There is a map.
To repeat what he said, The debate against climate change on whether or not it's real is null and void. That statement alone refutes my own speech, but it's right. We are too busy arguing over who created climate change, or how it was created, or is it even a thing? Why should we worry about it when we in fact should be worrying and debating on which solutions can better the effect? And if you're wondering who possibly created climate change, to quote unquote President Trump during his election, he said that China is the creator of climate change, which is stupid because humanity is the cause, and he probably very well knows that, but who cares? It's for publicity, right? So, frick it. Let's all be stupid and just stop it. Oh my God. To recap, we went over the evidence, the solutions, and the efforts on why climate change is slowed. It took humanity under a century to destroy the Earth. It can take humanity more than that or even less than that to fix her. They say change starts with one person, and our entire generation can be that one person. Thank you for the horrible speech.